And we are continuing to read from chapter 8, Alone Growing Up in Alexandria. And I thought today I would talk about my lavish lifestyle back then when I was, Lebo the entrepreneur. But I'm thinking let's rather continue reading because there's some pearls. There's a lot that I want to just share. And perhaps when we conclude chapter 8, I will then talk about the lifestyle that I led in my 20s, and I want to talk about it as a separate issue, maybe just as a reflection more than reading from the pages, because there isn't much in the pages about how I lived. I mean, there's just a page, which it's just detail that I think, those who know the book or those who will buy the book can read on their own. But the reason I want to reflect on that on its own as a standalone is because I want to compare it to now, not my life now, but lifestyles now. Because, we take for granted just how easy it was to live a particular middle class lifestyle back in the early 2000s. I mean, when I compare that to now, I'm thinking, oh, wow, I actually did not realize just how much a bubble I lived in. I lived in a bubble, meaning for a 26, 27, 28-year-old, I lived very, very lavish. And I'll talk about that separately and compare with 26, 27, 28-year-olds. I mean, just, as a side note, just the other day, I read a post on Facebook about someone who says, a lot of us who are in the late 30s and early 40s do not have houses. We don't own bonds. We don't have homes because we just simply cannot afford those. So I just want to talk about it as a socioeconomic thing, as a separate yeah, as a separate reflection on the Lebo channel. If you don't know me, I haven't done this in a while. If you don't know me and you stumbled upon this video, my name is Lebo. I am an author, a memoirist, a life coach, and a teacher. And here on YouTube, I read from my book, I reflect, and I leave some pearls of wisdom. I also do some teaching work around issues of healing, spirituality, personal development, and overall growth. So that's what I do. And right now, I am about to read and continuing reading about my first business, which was Exquisite Interiors, some of the rookie mistakes that we make as first-time entrepreneurs, as Black people in this country. At the time, I was only 26. And I say only because I'm 49. I might not look it, but I am. And I certainly feel it. Okay, let's put glasses. I had a big office, I had staff and a showroom that I did not really need. I worked very hard to keep my clients happy. Every month, I would dedicate a week just visiting all my clients. I would visit 3 or 4 a day, spending an hour or so just to connect with them. I would start in Pretoria and end up in the Vaal area by the end of that week. New orders would follow via fax, and sometimes clients would place orders immediately. I could connect with people and had clients of all races and ages, both men and women. If there's one thing that I can never be faulted on, even when I was, all over the place, helter-skelter, job hopping and resigning and starting over, if there's one thing I cannot be faulted on, was my work ethic. Even now, I used to work so hard. I mean, I used to plan my days like a machine. In a month, I would have a week specifically for client visits, and I would have a week specifically for supplier visits because you have to make connections with suppliers as well. It wasn't as friendly, but the clients were my favorite, obviously, and the suppliers wasn't so great because I did not know how to negotiate low prices or better credit, so that I don't have to pay COD. But I would do that. It would be a week for clients, a week for suppliers, and there'll be a week where I'm trying to do admin, something that I was never ever strong at. I still am not very good, but because one is older and one has had to learn over the years, I do take my admin quite seriously. But I used to just be a whiz those days. And I say in the first sentence that I read here that I had a big office staff, a showroom that I did not really need. And I say that I did not really need, and I'm saying this with the benefit of hindsight because now I know better. But back then, it seemed like a necessity because, here's what used to happen. Again, I don't know if it happens now because I don't do a lot of work with government. To become a vendor or a supplier in a government department, you would fill in this particular form, right? And where you are, the business is registered, tax number, tax clearance was always needed, which is good. And then they would ask if you have staff. And then they would ask if you have offices, like they would want a landline, a fax number, and they would want the business address. And back those days, they would come around and visit you. You know, the procurement people sometimes would come and visit you in your offices so that, you know, you are a real office, you are not some fly by night. And in as much as it sounds like it was above board, but it was actually an impossibility for Black people, which I think this is why fronting was so rife back then. Because, you know, you would, especially by government, you'd be required to have fancy offices. I worked from home for a while for the first year. And then by the second year, I rented offices just up the road in Edenvale, Van Riebeeck Avenue in Edenvale. And I had to have a showroom. And what is a showroom? A showroom is when you get office furniture from all your suppliers, and you just ask them to please, you know, just can you just showcase your three chairs, showcase your couches here. And you know, the suppliers would not lend you, they wouldn't rent the furniture out, they would not lend you the furniture, you'd have to buy it. So I had this massive office furniture that I had bought, that I had put in my office so that it's a showroom, so that when a government department comes and says, yeah, no, you've tendered for office furniture, we want to see where your premises are. And then they would visit and they would see a proper office with a staff there, Jane, who I had employed, and Sfiso, who was a driver, who sometimes he had a buggy. And so if I had a small delivery, let's say you ordered 2 or 3 chairs and maybe couch or a small coffee table, you know, he would then go and deliver. He would go pick up and deliver. But big orders, the factory directly would then go and deliver. So that was the arrangements. In other words, a huge office furniture deal, the manufacturer, the factory itself would be the one that actually goes directly to the client and delivers. And then I would come obviously with them on the day so that I send it, I sign their delivery slip, the client signs my delivery slip, I give the client my invoice, the supplier gives me the invoice. The invoice. I mean, people who understand how middlemanship works, that's basically just how business works. But sometimes government departments would expect. I remember this one time, I don't remember if it was Department of Education or what, but I worked with almost all the departments. They expected me to have the manufacturing, the actual furniture manufacturing, because I was tendering for something, I think it was over 200,000 or so. And, you know, some of the criteria was they wanted to see that I can deliver. So because I don't have a furniture manufacturing, I took them to OCW, you know, at Brian Strang's factory. And I remember this one guy saying, yeah, no, because it's not your factory, you are not truly BEE. But how was I going to have a factory? What Black person had an office furniture manufacturing factory back then? At the just soon after the dawn of democracy, where we had no entrepreneurs, where Black people were not business people, there were a handful. And I'm not saying there was no office furniture that was Black owned, but there weren't many. Definitely not in my era. And this was the thing that I did not understand, why they did not understand that. That I cannot have manufacturing myself. It is a lot of money and I don't even have the skills. I am a middleman. I am a middleman. I am supplying, but I am buying from a factory. Others would expect the factory that you are buying from to also be Black. And I'm thinking, you know, I'm thinking here now in hindsight that there was a lot that we didn't know, that we were all sort of fumbling along and trying to make this thing work. And some of them were genuinely so, you know, they genuinely expected you to be this Black-owned business that has a huge factory behind, you know, for you to justify getting that kind of business. And then they wouldn't, sometimes you would not get a tender because you don't, in their eyes, you don't have the muscle to deliver because it's not your own factory. So yeah, all that, you know, necessitated one to now create this unnecessary um, cost and have staff. So all that contributed, you know, sometimes to, not sometimes, all that contributed to some of the costs that one could have not had, you know. Meanwhile, you would find white people who were in office furniture, who were working from their own cottages at the back of their own homes, that were not subjected to all that. But then again, white people used to supply white companies, big conglomerates, big corporates, which I could never get. I mean, the only corporate work that I once got was at Sasol. And it was because in supply chain, there was a black guy, Sandile. Gosh, I forgot Sandile's surname. Sandile, he was in supply chain and he was in procurement. And he really tried to give me work. I mean, he didn't give me all the work, but you know, your basics like your canteen office furniture, your canteen furniture, your reception furniture, chairs, if they wanted like a lot of chairs for an auditorium or chairs for this, you know, I would get a lot of easy business. But the actual desking, there was specific specs that they wanted, which a specific company would supply. But you know, it was just a very interesting time, you know, now that I am reading and reflecting here. So let me just finish. Let me finish this one half a page, and then we can continue next time when I read again. Okay. One particular client at government department, Dorothy. Oh gosh, I can't believe I wrote her name. Ah, Dorothy. Made sure that my business was supported. She was one of the few officials who applied the BEE codes and supported gender equality. Oh, Batong, aus Dorothy, kana aus Dorothy Nelimangs van Sagage. And it was Department of Education. I actually remember this one. And she made sure that I get deals. I mean, she made sure that whatever they do, you know, they don't put me under unnecessary pressure. For some reason, she understood the dynamics. She could tell that no, Oksalayo, Exquisite Interiors, go SIPs. It wasn't SIPs then, it was something else. Kind of nailing. Yeah, it was SIPs. It is registered, it is her. She owns the business, she has a tax clearance. Yes, for Rubarakali Makhoa, it's one thing we'll deal with, but we are dealing with her. We are not dealing with whites, we are dealing with her. So you give Lebo business. And I delivered. Oh my God. Oh my God. This is so helpful, you know, because you know, hey, memory, because in my mind, I messed up Exquisite Interiors. It was just, I messed up. I turned over and I had small margins and I bought a house prematurely, which I'm still coming to, and it went to hell. But as I'm reading and as I'm reflecting and as I'm remembering, I remember that actually there was a lot of good that I did. I really and truly worked hard, you know? I really worked hard. And I guess, you know, maybe let's leave it here for today and we shall continue. I mean, there's just 3 pages left, but they're so layered and I want to take my time and just go step by step because and take it nice and easy and take it slowly and honor the parts that are important. Because the next part that I'm going to read is my relationship with this white man called Mr. Brian String. And there's a lot to reflect there. You know, there's a lot to unpack, especially 20 years later, hindsight, a hindsight that I would not have seen earlier than this. So maybe let's just leave it here for now. And let's say, this is my story. I cannot wait to hear yours.